പ്രിയ സ്നേഹിത, ബ്രദറൻ തിയോളജിക്കൽ ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂട്ട് നടത്തുന്ന വേദ പഠന ശിബിരത്തിലേക്ക് താങ്കൾക്ക് സ്വാഗതം. ബൈബിൾ സ്കൂളുകളിൽ പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്ന എല്ലാ വിഷയങ്ങളും ഞങ്ങളുടെ സിലബസിൽ ഉൾപ്പെടുത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഈ വിഷയങ്ങളെ ക്രമാനുഗതമായി പഠിപ്പിക്കുവാനായിട്ടാണ് ഞങ്ങൾ പരിശ്രമിക്കുന്നത്. ഇത് താങ്കൾക്ക് അനുഗ്രഹമാകും എന്നതിന് രണ്ടു പക്ഷമില്ല. ഞങ്ങൾ അയക്കുന്ന ഒരു വീഡിയോ പോലും താങ്കൾക്ക് നഷ്ടമാകാതിരിക്കുവാൻ ശ്രദ്ധിച്ചാലും ഞങ്ങളുടെ ചാനൽ സബ്സ്ക്രൈബ് ചെയ്യുകയും ബെൽ ഐക്കൺ അമർത്തുകയും ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ ഞങ്ങൾ വീഡിയോ പോസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ തന്നെ താങ്കൾക്ക് നോട്ടിഫിക്കേഷൻ ലഭിക്കുന്നു. തന്മൂലം ഒരു വീഡിയോയും താങ്കൾക്ക് നഷ്ടമാകുകയില്ല എന്ന് മാത്രമല്ല, ഈ വീഡിയോകൾ നിങ്ങളുടെ ജീവിതത്തിൽ അനുഗ്രഹ കാരണമായിരിക്കും എന്നതിന് തർക്കവുമില്ല.
It's a privilege meeting all of you once again. I'm sure you are enjoying the classes and also the question answers. So let me begin with a question first. Do you have any more new questions or questions left from the last class? Any questions?
If anyone has questions, please raise your hand and I will unmute your mic.
Okay. One list of questions is with me related to evolution, and we will handle that question when we come to evolution creation in our study. Last week, I reminded that in each class I would like to introduce at least one printed resource so that you might realize what a vast range of printed materials is already available and how much work people are doing in the field of reliability of the Christian faith. Of course, 95% of the questions that come against Christian faith do not require specialization. Only 5% of people need to do specialize, and those who specialize in Christian apologetics or the reliability of Christian faith, a vast amount of material is available. Today, let me introduce you to a standard journal. This is a journal of the International. Is the image readable, or is there a left-right inversion?
No, it is readable, uncle.
Okay. Surprisingly, on my computer, I am unable to read it. There is a left-right inversion. Yeah. So this is Journal of the International Society of Christian Apologetics, and this is a 12-year-old journal. Every year they produce one issue. One of the standard works in the field of Christian apologetics. Apologetics means defense of Christian faith. And once again, let me remind you that a vast number of studies are going on around the world in the field of Bible, science, evolution, and the reliability of the Christian faith. In the last class and also in the class before that, I quoted a number of references from the Bible which were related to scientific subjects. And I reminded that science discovered these things only hundreds, or in some cases only thousands of years after the Bible recorded these things. That is very surprising, because no ancient book or no book contemporary to the Bible have this kind of accurate scientific and technological information. As we proceed with our studies, there are certain statements in the Bible or certain historical records in the Bible which seem to pose a great difficulty. And today I would like to examine the subject of those historical records which seem to pose some kind of a scientific problem. One of them is Joshua's long day. The history or the historical narrative is known to us. It is found in the book of Joshua, chapter 10, verses 12 to 13. Joshua, chapter 10, verses 12 to 13, when there was a battle, and the people of God, they were prevailing when there was strong daylight, but they started to lose when daylight started to reduce. And Joshua raised his hand and commanded the sun to stand still. It says, in the presence of the Israelites, he said, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon. Moon, stop over Ayalon Valley." The sun stood still and the moon did not move until the nation had conquered its enemies. The first objection people raise against this statement is this. Well, listen, it is not the sun that is moving, and therefore this statement is wrong. Please remember that this statement was made 3,000 years ago. In 3,000 years, we have learned much. Today we know that sun doesn't move. We know that it is earth that is rotating. Modern man who knows that it is the earth which is rotating, what kind of an expression does he use? In the morning, do we say that the earth has rotated to see the sun? No. Even in the 21st century, we speak about sunrise. The sun rose in the east and the sun set in the west. So if modern man who knows the details of astronomy to such great detail, if we continue to use figurative speech, we have to allow the authors of the Bible also the same concession. We cannot say that no, modern man may use figurative speech. We won't allow the freedom of figurative speech to writers of the Bible. Then you are being unnecessarily stubborn. So Bible does use the figurative speech of sun moving in the sky, moon moving in the sky. We, the 21st century people also use the same figurative speech. So the scripture is making no mistake. The second question that arises from this passage is, if the sun was seen as standing in a particular position, if the moon was seen as standing in a particular position, that means the earth must have stopped its rotation. Yes, in all possibility, the earth either stopped its rotation, or on that particular day, the rotation of the earth along its axis underwent some very serious crisis. Of course, even without stopping the earth, God could have done it. At the same time, it's good to search human history to see whether human history provides any kind of evidence that on that particular day there was some kind of a cataclysm. Was there some very big geographical or astronomical crisis? Now, before I go forward with historical data, there is one thing I want to remind you. I am very sure that many of you have heard the story of how a computer at NASA discovered a missing day. The story goes like this, that a computer at NASA was calculating the position of planets and stars 100 years ago, 200, 500, 1,000, 2000 and 3000, and suddenly the computer stopped, and they checked everything. There was no problem with the software, and finally they asked the computer what the problem is, and from the computer they discovered that a day was missing in the universe. This story has been circulated hundreds of times in Christian media, and many preachers have preached it. Let me inform you, there was no such experiment at NASA. There was no such indication by the computer. This story is a fiction. This story came because one man made up a story and published in some obscure newspaper, and some prophetic preacher picked it up, and from him all kind of preachers picked it up. That story is a myth. There was nothing like that at NASA, and please do not use that story to defend the Bible. There is so much evidence all around to defend the Bible that we do not need the help of cheating stories. This was a deception done by one man. And along with this, there is one more story that I want to mention, because these are all linked with reliability of the Christian faith. I'm sure many of you heard the story that in Siberia they discovered hell. They were tunneling deep down vertically, and once they tunneled about 10 kilometers, scientists who went down heard sounds of souls in hell which were screaming. Again, that is a fiction. Nothing like that ever happened in Siberia. And we have a very definite record of how that story came. Actually, in Scandinavian countries, there is one day of the year when you can publish any kind of stupid story in newspapers, and all the Scandinavians know that these stories are not real. There is a similar phenomenon in North India, in the Hindi belt. On the day of Holi, Holi is the festival when you throw colors over each other. Only on that day, and on that day, a newspaper can publish any kind of story. So I still remember on one holy day, one day or during one holy festival in North India, the local Hindi newspaper published that the vice chancellor of our local university, the university of which I was a student, and the university where I worked, the news was that vice chancellor resigned, and the peon in the university has been appointed as the vice chancellor, and the peon declared that every idiot in the university will be granted a PhD. The only requirement is there is a form, you just fill the form. If you don't know how to sign, you put your thumb impression, and the next day you will be granted a PhD. Anybody who has been brought up in that land knows that on the day of Holi, such news is published by newspapers to entertain people, and no criminal charges are ever brought against those newspapers. Those newspapers, when they publish this kind of a news, there is a bracket. Usually newspapers in a bracket say Times News, such and such news, or news by our correspondent. In North India, when a newspaper publishes this kind of a fake news, in bracket they say HNS. HNS means Holy News Service, and everybody knows that Holy News Service is fake. Scandinavian countries have a similar day when they can publish anything. So one particular year, one of these atheists decided to fool Christians, and he published the story that hell has been discovered. And really, he tried to fool Christians, but there were a lot of foolish Christians who simply picked up the story. circulated it all around the world, and I am often highly embarrassed when I sit in an audience of, say, 100 to 500, and one of these preachers would stand in the pulpit and say, scientists discovered hell in Siberia, and we have a scientifically trained man, Brother Johnson, in our midst, or Dr. Johnson, whatever they say, and he will be able to confirm. Now, if I confirm, I'm confirming a lie. If I say that is a myth, I'm making that evangelist embarrassed in front of others. So I have faced this many, many times. Please remember, in the field of defense of Christian faith, a number of imaginary stories are circulating. One is the NASA computer story. The other is Siberia hell story. And please remember, if we can go down and hear the voice of people from hell, we can easily design suits using which we can go further down and rescue those souls. This much common sense those people should have exercised before circulating this story. There is another story which has caused me much embarrassment, and the story is that in America, they found out the weight of the human soul. They weighed a person before he died, and they weighed a person after he died, and there was a difference of exactly 24 grams, and therefore the weight of the human soul is 24 grams. Number one, human soul is not material, and only materials can be weighed. Number two, no such experiment was ever done in the USA. Rather, this was a fraud article published by somebody. And there also, I have been put to great embarrassment many times when I am sitting in the audience and one brother stands up or one Upadeshi stands up and says that, hey, we have Brother Johnson Philip or Dr. Johnson Philip in our midst. He reads a lot, and we will ask him to confirm the story. If he says, you ask him, that's okay. But if he asks me to confirm the story in public, he puts me in a very embarrassing situation, because I have to inform everybody that that story is false. So the story of the NASA computer, the story of the Siberian hell, and the story of human soul, that it weighs only 24 grams or that it weighs as much as 24 grams, these are fictional stories. The scripture does not need a lot of fiction or even a tiny bit of fiction to defend it. So much material is available about the reliability of the Christian faith that an entire massive library can be filled with that material, and still it would not exhaust all the researches that are available. I will come to this statement once again when we look at Bible and archaeology, because that is an area where a lot of material is available, and so much is available that not even 1/10 of it has been printed or published in books. So Joshua's long day, NASA story is false. Okay, then the question that arises is there any evidence that there was something on Joshua's day? Now, first of all, let us remember that it is a historical statement, and historical statements cannot be examined with the help of physics or chemistry or mathematics or computer sciences. Historical statements, whether historical statements are made by the Bible or historical statements are made by a person, they can be examined only with the help of history. One scientist who pioneered this area, historical examination of what happened in the last 5,000 years, his name is Immanuel Velikovsky. Please keep this name in mind. The name is Immanuel Velikovsky. He was a scientist, at the Harvard University, and a great scholar, and also an atheist. He was not a Christian. He was not a Christian believer. Immanuel Velikovsky was sifting through historical data, and about 3,000 years ago, as he was sifting through historical and archaeological data, he found a very big anomaly. Something was simply wrong, because till that particular date, everything in history was going in one direction. And suddenly, before that, the data is showing in another direction. For example, Egyptian temples. This is an example, just an example, not specific. Egyptian temples, which always face east, constructed before this date and after this date, they face in two different directions. How is that possible? That means if you are making temples which faced into the eastern direction, how is it possible that a temple made 10 years ago faces in one direction, and the temple that was made 10 years after faces, say, 10 degrees to another direction? He was stunned. He examined all the historical data that was available to him, and he found out a similar thing in many cultures. Temples built before a particular date pointed in one direction, and temples built after a particular date pointed in another direction. From the massive amount of data that he collected, he came to this conclusion that on a particular date in a particular year, some kind of a big turmoil was there. So he kept on searching data, and finally he found out the history of Joshua's long day, which is mentioned in the Bible. And he calculated how long ago was Joshua's day, and he found out that it was 2,900 or something like that. And to his amazement, this was the same year in which everything had gone topsy-turvy in the world. And therefore, he wrote a book. The title of his book was Worlds in Collision. He came to a conclusion that perhaps many planets had come close to the Earth, and because of that, the axis of the Earth was disturbed. Today, every school-going child knows that the axis of the Earth is tilted by 23 degrees. Am I right? Or is it something else? Well, if I'm wrong, please feel free to correct. I'm an old man, and my memory sometimes doesn't work properly. So the axis of the Earth is tilted. Immanuel Velikovsky came to the conclusion that on that particular day, because of a certain alignment of planets, the Earth went through some kind of an upheaval, and the axis was shifted. And that's why the temples made before that, they pointed in one direction, and the temples constructed after that, they pointed in another direction, though both of the temples claimed that they were facing east. Velikovsky wrote a very massive book and gave it to one of the biggest publishers in the world, and that is Macmillan. Macmillan is much more larger than what most of us realize. In the Western countries, it is they who handle college textbooks. Macmillan, as it was proceeding with this, a very prominent atheist of that time, he came to know that such and such book is being published by a fellow atheist, and that is lending a support to the Bible. And he immediately called Macmillan. This scientist's name is Harold Shapley. He was at a time, he was an extremely influential man in America. And he told Macmillan Press, if you publish this book, I will see to it that all American universities boycott your book. Macmillan was terrified. So what Macmillan did was, they persuaded one of their subsidiaries, and they gave this book to their subsidiary. And finally, it is their Macmillan subsidiary that published it. And the book became an instant bestseller. Immediately, it sold more than, the publisher is Doubleday. Many of you know Doubleday. Doubleday published it. More than 1 lakh copies were printed, and atheists were very upset. And they brought an allegation. Well, what is so big about this? This book is based upon historical data, and historical data can be inaccurate. What Velikovsky did was, he published a second book. The first was Worlds in Collision. The second book is Earth in Upheaval. And in the second book, Earth in Upheaval, he brought geographical data, archaeological data, solid, hard evidence to show that there was a day of very big crisis. He was removed from his professorship. Under the influence of other atheists, he was removed from his professorship just because his works supported the Bible, though he was not a Christian. Some of his students were very upset, very, very upset. They started publishing 2 journals. One was known as Pense. The other was known as, I think it was known as Kairos Times. And one by one, they defended Immanuel Velikovsky. And finally, his position was given back to him by the university. Eventually, Immanuel Velikovsky published a large number of books, many of them. Actually, he was a secular man. He remained a secular man. He was not a Bible believer. He was not a Christian. He was a thoroughgoing scholar. And all what he published goes to support the Bible. He has published a series of books related to Egyptian chronology. That's very interesting, because on the basis of the Bible, we can produce a chronology, and that chronology somehow doesn't match with the Egyptian chronology. And a lot of secular people used to attack the Bible. See, we have a chronology, and the Bible chronology doesn't match with it, so Bible must be wrong. But Immanuel Velikovsky published a number of books on Egyptian chronology, and once he published those books and corrections, biblical chronology exactly matches Egyptian chronology. So once again, the works of Velikovsky came as a big support to the Bible. Related to this, there is another historical document found in historical record found in Second Kings chapter 20, and also Isaiah chapter 38. 2 Kings chapter 20 and Isaiah chapter 38. This is about what we call as the dial of Ahaz. Actually, there was a solar dial. King Hezekiah became very sick. He prayed to God, and God said, okay, I will heal you. I will extend your life, and I will give you a sign. If you want, the shadow on the sundial will go forward 10 degrees. No, but if you don't want that, then I will allow the shadow to go backwards 20 degrees. Shadow always moves forward, and therefore a movement of 10 degrees doesn't matter. So the king said, my lord, moving 10 degrees forward is nothing special. Let it move backwards 10 degrees. That's approximately equal to 40 minutes. How did it happen? Once again, Immanuel Velikovsky found out that the exact date of this king, when the shadow went back, on that day, there was some kind of an upheaval on the earth, and many sundials, many temples, and many other things corresponding to that date now show that there was some kind of a shifting on that day. So, my dear friends, brothers, and sisters, many statements in the Bible may look very surprising. And atheists may often say that these are scientifically wrong and that there is no scientific evidence for these things. That's not true. If Bible makes a historical claim, history related claim, what is recorded in Joshua, what is recorded about the dial of Ahaz, these are all historical events. They have to be examined not with the help of a NASA computer, they have to be examined with the help of history, and they also have to be examined with the help of historical records such as archaeological discoveries. And archaeological discoveries have shown that these two events did take place. Another problem which a lot of people ask is, what about the story of Jonah? Because a whale has a small mouth and small throat, a whale cannot swallow a man. So how can Christians claim that a whale swallowed Jonah? Again, that's a very interesting question. Actually, a whale is the largest living being known to us. In 1800s, there used to be whales which were 100 feet long. Even an elephant was a pygmy in front of that. But even that whale had such a small throat that it could not swallow a man. And therefore, atheists often use this objection against the Bible. Now, the problem is not with the atheist, the problem is with the Christian. Because Bible doesn't say that a whale swallowed Jonah. Actually, it is Sunday school teachers who love to say, there was a giant whale and that swallowed Jonah. The Bible actually says, maybe a translation here or there might have erroneously translated it as whale, but if you consult multiple Bible translations, you would find that multiple Bible translations uniformly translate it as a giant sea creature. It was a giant sea creature, that's all. It was not a whale. So first of all, if a person asks you, I want to remind you, you don't have to defend the whale story. Rather, it was a giant sea creature. Then they may ask, what was that giant sea creature? Well, we should know that in the past 6,000 years, tens of thousands of sea creatures have become extinct. Hundreds of thousands of land creatures have become extinct. Since tens of thousands of sea creatures have become extinct, the creature that swallowed Jonah approximately 2,600 years ago no longer exists. Number one. But creatures which were big enough to swallow Jonah did exist. Number two, though whales have a small throat, scientists who study whales have found that it is an expandable throat, and therefore whales can swallow not only humans, but they can also swallow very large animals, very large animals. They have also found out that not only can whales swallow humans and very large animals, they have also found that whales can eventually vomit them. There are historical records for all this. 1800s was a time when whales were hunted with the spirit of competition. Today, as we sit in the presence of electric light, we do not often we do not realize that there was no electricity in 1800s. In 1800s, they used the fat of whales to lit lamps. And since the population of the world was in crores in 1800, lot of whale fat was needed for lighting the night, lighting auditoriums. We know that in 1800s there were many large churches where there were night services attended by hundreds, countless hundreds, or even thousands of people. Those halls were lit by whales, whale fat. Whale fat was used in a special kind of lamp. And because of that, whaling or capturing whales became a very big industry in many countries around the world. And as they started capturing more and more whales, and as they captured, cutting them open, they found out that many whales had swallowed animals and sea creatures which were tens, scores, or hundreds of times the human size. And therefore, number one, Bible doesn't say it was a whale. You should clarify to the atheist. Number two, even if the scripture says it is a whale, we have plenty of historical evidence from 1800s that whales could swallow creatures which were very large. You will ask Brother Johnson, why 1800s? Why don't you talk about the 1900s? That's again something that we all should understand. In the last class, I reminded you that God of the universe, our Lord and our Creator, is interested in conservation of His creation. He allows us to cut trees, but we should also plant them. He allows us to hunt animals, but he also wants us to hunt in a limit so that animals, plants, fish do not become extinct. In 1800s, they killed so many whales that this 100 feet long whale no longer exists. Today, the largest whale which exists is, and which is rarely seen, is only 30 feet long. Unfortunately, we destroyed them all. And that's the reason why we have no evidence from 20th century, because by 20th century, we already destroyed all the massive whales. That also, please keep it in mind. So these were three things which atheists often bring forward to claim that historical record in the Bible is not right. And as I told you, historical records are plenty to show that the Bible is right. I'm very sorry, I had about 10 books by Immanuel Velikovsky. But recently, there was an upheaval in my library. All these books were packed into cartons and then kept back by some people. And in that process, for the last 4 weeks, I have been searching for Immanuel Velikovsky books, and it was not simple one or two books. There were 10 books. I am simply unable to find even one of them. But if I find even one of them, by the end of this series, I would definitely present it to you, show it to you. I won't present them to anybody because those books are now out of print. Then another difficulty which people bring forward is, okay, we accept that historical data might support the Bible. They might accept, but they might bring forth other objections against the Bible. When I was in BSc, I came to BSc in 1971. I was 2 years behind schedule. I should have entered BSc in 69. So in 71, as I entered BSc, the big hot talk worldwide was about heart transplantation. I'm sure some of the senior brothers here remember that in South Africa, they transplanted the heart of a man by the name of Philip Blayberg. So now, till that time, many of our preachers used to preach that human soul resides in the heart, and therefore, if you change the heart of a man, you are changing the soul. So that came as a big opposition. These days, that opposition is not seen, or it is seen rarely only. But let me remind you, the scripture nowhere says that our soul resides in the heart, or it resides in the brain, or it resides anywhere. The actual residence of the soul, the actual the location of the soul, whether it is distributed throughout the body, is not mentioned in the Bible. Actually, we should not handle soul the way we handle body. Our body can be cut. If the soul is residing spread in the body like a material, then when we conduct tonsillectomy, a portion of the tonsils are removed, then you are removing a portion of the soul also. When you cut your nails, you are removing a portion of your soul also. No, that is not the way soul resides in the body. Soul is a non-material part, and therefore, about soul, we should avoid all kind of speculation, man-made theories, and also foolish interpretations. So I still remember, because in my college everybody knew that I'm a Bible believing guy, and when Philip Blayberg's heart was transplanted, first transplantation, many of my fellow students said, "Hey Johnson, what about Bible? Bible says that man's soul resides in the heart, isn't it?" That argument is no longer heard, but it can raise its ugly head anytime. Another argument that raised its head during my college years was about test tube babies. There was a big talk that man will one day be able to manufacture babies in laboratory. And then in USA, they announced the first test tube baby. Patrick Steptoe was the man, the father of the baby. I don't remember the name of the mother, but that was in the 70s. And a lot of people said, listen, listen, listen. Man has made another human being in the laboratory. And now what? You say that man was created by God, but look, man has created babies in laboratory. That was such a big myth, very big myth. Number one, no test tube was involved. What was involved is known as a petri dish. And any of you who has a biochemistry or a laboratory background, medical lab background, you know that petri dishes are very commonly used in laboratories. Actually, what happened was they simply took a fertilized ovum, multiplied it, allowed it to multiply in a petri dish using special nutrients, and after a particular stage, they implanted it back into its own mother's womb or uterus. It was basically a surgical procedure, nothing more. No life was created, no baby was created. I hope many of you know that during heart transplantation, the heart taken from a donor, is kept in a very protective casing. It's not beating. Please remember, it is not beating. Once it is connected to the patient, and once the doctors find that all the connections are pakka, they use a special machine to give a special shock to particular spots when the heart starts beating. Not only for them, even in some very special cases, when the heart stops beating after a heart attack, they do the same thing. There are particular spots on the chest which the doctor shocks, and the heart starts to beat. They have not created a human being. It's a surgical procedure. They have not transported soul from one person to another. See, heart transplantation is a surgical procedure, just as hand transplantation or face transplantation. I live in a town where there is a specialist hospital, and if a person's face has burnt badly, but if a donor is available, accidentally dead donor is available, this hospital specializes in taking the face of that person, skin of that person, to transplant it to this person with a disfigured face. All of these are surgical processes. Surgical processes are not creating life. They are amazing. Actually, surgical processes are definitely amazing, but they are not creating a life. They are intervening to help in the already existing human body. So test tube babies, no, they did not create babies. All what they did was they took a fertilized ovum, passed it through a procedure which can be called as a part of the surgical process, and re-implanted into its mother, and it became and a normal delivery was there. Well, you may say, brother, in that case, okay, we understand, but what about cloning? There's a big hue and cry around the world that cloning is creation of life. And I still remember it was around AD 2000, 20 years ago, when there was a big hue and cry that scientists have created a sheep which was named as Dolly. And scientists have created life, they claimed. For the next 2 years, wherever I went to speak among young people, that question came repeatedly to me. Uncle, they have created life, they have cloned, and therefore now man doesn't need God. Please tell me one thing. How do we get a new rose plant? Through seeds? No. We spot a mature stem. We cut that stem carefully. If needed, we might put some kind of an enzyme or some kind of a chemical, or put it in a chemical dip and then plant in the earth. It produces roots, and it becomes a new rose plant. Is that creation of life? Not at all. Some of the senior brothers who might be from Central Travancore, they might know about a plant, lemon plant known as Udichugutti. Lot of lemon plants are available, many varieties are available, but one of them is so notorious that you just break a branch, even if a tender branch, and just plant it. It gives out roots, and it becomes eventually a mature plant. That is why it is known as Odichugutti. I saw it for the first time when I went to that Perumbatti area. I was stunned. God has given it this property of reviving itself without seed, without anything. What we see in a rose cutting, or what we see in Odichugutti, which even got that name because of its property to simply regenerate itself from any kind of a branch, that is not creation of life. That is using the property or exploiting the property which is already there in the living plant. Similar to plants, there are many animals which can easily revive themselves. There are many creatures. If you cut them into two, they will become two living animals. In zoology, such animals are called lower level animals. Actually, when you study them, you will find that there is nothing lower or upper. Those are different kinds of animals, but lower level animals can reproduce themselves without any problem. Similarly, there are some animals which do not need a fertilized egg for reproduction. Such births is known as parthenogenesis, virgin birth, because only one sex is involved in reproduction. So actually, cloning is a process which God has built into living beings. And those of you who have a biology background, I hope you remember the law of biogenesis, which says that life comes only from pre-existing life. That is a law, not a theory. Law of biogenesis. And all the sterilization that we see in medical laboratories is based upon the law of biogenesis, which says that life comes from only from pre-existing life, and therefore in an operation theater, if you destroy germs which can multiply, if you destroy them, then there will be no new germs, and if their numbers is kept very low, there will be no problem. I don't know how it is in your place, but in Kerala, hand spray has become universal. Go to the post office, first the bottle is there. Go to a wedding, lot of bottles are there. Go to a bank, bottles are there. And in some places, even there will be a man at the door, a sentry at the door. He will say, "Sir, here is a hand spray. Please spray your hand and rub it like this, and then only you will be allowed to go inside." That is based upon the law of biogenesis. Life comes from pre-existing life, and therefore, if you destroy harmful organisms up to a given level, then there will be what are left, they cannot harm you. Cloning was not a production of any kind of new life. It was not production of life in laboratory. Rather, cloning uses a property which man has used for thousands of years in agriculture. In Kerala, cloning is used very often. You all know that those who have cows, and North India, those who have buffaloes, it's called giving some kind of an injection to make it pregnant. Actually, what they are doing is they are implanting fertilized ova to these animals. Do you know how they are fertilized? They pick up some of the best bulls and fertilize the ovum of these cows. And once there is a fertilized ovum, it is allowed to multiply in laboratory glassware. So a single cell multiplies to 2, and then it multiplies to 4, and then it multiplies to 8, and then to 16. At a particular stage, they use a surgical knife to divide it into 2. And once it divides into 2, it becomes 2. This way, it is estimated that a fertilized ovum can be multiplied for up to 80 times. It's not creation of life. It is pre-existing life which is being multiplied. So please remember, man has not created life in the laboratory. All what man has done is he has perfected the medical laboratory techniques to aid human reproduction. With that, I conclude today's class. We looked at 2 different subjects. One was historical records in the Bible. They raise a lot of objections against these historical records, but historical examination of records, not by Christians, not by creationists, by their people. Their own people have shown that those historical records which are there in the Bible were true. Second, we looked at creation of life kind of experiments. Nobody has ever created artificial life. Nobody has created artificial life. Some of you who might be reading the latest technological review, you might have come across a book known as Life at the Speed of Light, where a scientist in America claims to have created life. I had that book in my collection and I wanted a discussion, but I could not locate that book. Again, let me tell you, they have not created life. With that, I close today's class, and if it is not too late for all of you, if any one of you wants to ask a quick question, I might be able to handle it. But if there is no question, that means if you don't want to ask any quick questions, send your longer questions to me. Richie has my number. Sabu has my number. They would be happy to give my WhatsApp number. Send the questions to me. Don't think that Johnson uncle will be offended. No, I'm not offended by questions. I thrive upon questions. That's one reason for my help.
One quick question, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you going to discuss about biological subjects in this class?
I will be discussing evolution.
Yeah, because that time I may be interested to know from Job 40 and 41.
Yes.
We read about 2 creatures.
Yes.
One is Behemoth and the other one is Leviathan.
Yeah, I will be happy. That's actually not exactly related to biology. Those were zoological creatures, but now they are things of history. Okay. So Lord willing, next class opening, I will handle them, either opening or closing. I will be handling evolution as a separate subject because it needs some attention from us. That will be handled in one single class.
പ്രിയ സ്നേഹിത, ബ്രദറൻ തിയോളജിക്കൽ ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂട്ട് പ്രസിദ്ധീകരിക്കുന്ന ഈ വീഡിയോ താങ്കൾക്ക് പ്രയോജനപ്പെട്ടു എന്ന് ഞങ്ങൾ വിശ്വസിക്കുന്നു. ബൈബിൾ സ്കൂളുകളിൽ പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്ന എല്ലാ വിഷയങ്ങളും ഞങ്ങൾ ഞങ്ങളുടെ സിലബസിൽ ഉൾപ്പെടുത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഇവ താങ്കൾക്ക് അനുഗ്രഹമാകും എന്ന് ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് ഉറപ്പുണ്ട്. ഞങ്ങൾ അയക്കുന്ന എല്ലാ വീഡിയോയും താങ്കൾ കാണുകയും അതിൽ ഉൾപ്പെടുത്തിയിരിക്കുന്ന വിഷയങ്ങൾ പഠിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുക. ഞങ്ങളുടെ ചാനൽ സബ്സ്ക്രൈബ് ചെയ്യുകയും ബെൽ ഐക്കൺ അമർത്തുകയും ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ ഞങ്ങൾ അയക്കുന്ന വീഡിയോകളുടെ നോട്ടിഫിക്കേഷൻ താങ്കൾക്ക് ലഭിക്കും. തന്മൂലം ഒരു വീഡിയോയും നിങ്ങൾക്ക് നഷ്ടമാകുകയില്ല. ഈ വീഡിയോകൾ നിങ്ങളുടെ ആത്മീയ ജീവിതത്തിനും ഭാവി തലമുറയ്ക്കും ആത്മീയ പ്രചോദനം ഉളവാക്കും എന്നുള്ളതിന് യാതൊരു സംശയവുമില്ല. താങ്കളുടെ വിലയേറിയ അഭിപ്രായങ്ങളും നിർദ്ദേശങ്ങളും ഞങ്ങളുടെ ഇമെയിൽ വഴിയായും ഫോൺ വഴിയായും ഞങ്ങളെ അറിയിക്കാവുന്നതാണ്.